was 67 years old the afternoon my son-in-law sat across from me at my own kitchen table and told me, with the patient tone people use on small children, that I no longer owned my house. It was a Tuesday. I remember, because Tuesday was the day I used to drive over to St. Gold, Catherine's, to read to the second graders, and I'd just gotten home and put my coat on the hook by the door. The smell of the lemon cake I'd baked that morning was still in the air. My daughter, the only child I had left after losing her brother to a motorcycle accident in 1998, was sitting beside her husband with her hands folded in her lap the way she used to fold them in church when she was a little girl and didn't want me to know she'd been chewing gum. "Mom," she said, and then she stopped, looked at her husband, looked at her hands. "What your daughter is trying to say," her husband said, "is that the house has been sold. The buyer wants possession by the end of next week. We're going to need you out of here by Sunday." I poured myself another cup of coffee. My hand was steady. I think that surprised them more than anything. "Sunday," I said. "Sunday," he repeated. His name was Theodore, not Ted, not Teddy. Theodore. He'd insisted on the full name from the first time my daughter brought him to Thanksgiving 11 years ago. A tall man with a salesman's smile and a habit of correcting people about wine. He worked in commercial real estate down in Charlotte, made good money, or said he did, drove a Range Rover that he washed every Saturday in the driveway my husband had poured himself in 1987. "And where exactly am I supposed to go on Sunday?" I asked. My daughter finally looked up. "Mom, we found a beautiful place, Sunny Meadows. It's only 20 minutes from us. They have activities. They have a craft room. You'll make so many friends. Sunny Meadows is assisted living. It's a community. It's assisted living, sweetheart. I know what Sunny Meadows is. I drive past it every time I go to the dentist." Theodore slid a glossy brochure across the table. The kind of brochure with smiling, silver-haired models who have never set foot in the place. On the front, a woman who looked about my age was laughing at a Scrabble board with a man who was definitely a paid actor. Inside, a price sheet, partially folded. I looked at the price sheet. I looked at Theodore. "This is $6,000 a month," I said. "It's the best in the area. $6,000 a month is more than my Social Security and pension combined." "That's why we sold the house, Mom," my daughter said, and her voice had that careful, rehearsed quality to it that told me Theodore had been coaching her in the car on the way over. "The equity from the house will cover Sunny Meadows for years. You'll be safe. You'll be cared for." I sipped my coffee. I looked around the kitchen. The cabinets my husband had stripped and refinished the summer before he retired. The window above the sink where I had stood and watched my children climb the maple tree out back. The dent in the wall by the pantry where my son had thrown a baseball when he was 9 and we'd never bothered to patch it because every time I went to do it, I couldn't quite bring myself to. "And what are you and Theodore going to do with the rest?" I asked. The silence that followed was the kind of silence I'd heard once before in my life, when the state trooper knocked on the door at 3 in the morning to tell me about my son. "The rest," my daughter said. "The house sold for what, sweetheart?" "You haven't told me the number, but I know what houses on this street are going for. The Hendersons sold theirs last spring for $430,000, and theirs didn't have the addition or the new roof, so let's call it $450. Maybe $480. Take out closing costs, agent commission, you've got maybe $420 in your pocket. Sunny Meadows at $6,000 a month, that's $72,000 a year. Even if I live to be 100, that's barely $200,000. So what's the other $200 for?" Theodore's salesman's smile flickered, just for a half second, like a fluorescent bulb when the power surges. Then it came back, brighter than before. "Mom, this isn't about money. This is about your safety. You've been alone in this house since Dad passed. You're not getting any younger. The stairs alone. I'm 67, Theodore. I'm not 87. I climbed Stone Mountain with my granddaughter last fall." "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be," my daughter said, and now her eyes were wet. I think the tears were real, even if everything else about that afternoon was rehearsed. "We're trying to help you. Theodore has worked so hard on this. We had to move fast because of the market. Worked so hard on this, I repeated. Worked so hard on selling my house. Our house, Mom. I set the coffee cup down very, very carefully. I have a thing about my mother's china. It belonged to her mother before that. Tell me again, I said. Whose house? She looked at Theodore. He took over. After your husband passed, you put the deed into a joint arrangement with your daughter. For estate planning purposes, you signed the papers yourself, at the hospital, when you were sorting out his affairs. So technically, your daughter has been a co-owner since 2019, and as a co-owner, she has every right to initiate a sale. I looked at him. I looked at her. I let the silence sit there in the kitchen like a third guest at the table. Is that so? I said. I simply smiled. I poured them each a cup of coffee, because that is what I do. I cut them each a slice of the lemon cake, because there is no point letting a good cake go uneaten, just because the people eating it have lost their minds. And I said, well, this is a lot to take in. Let me sleep on it. Come back Thursday. They left at 6:15. I watched the Range Rover pull out of the driveway. I watched my daughter not look back. I watched Theodore put his hand on the back of her neck the way a man does when he's steering a horse. Then I went to my husband's old desk in the den, and I pulled out the folder. My husband was a high school history teacher for 34 years. To everyone in town, he was a sweet, slightly absent-minded man who wore the same brown corduroy jacket every fall and made terrible puns. To me, he was a man who'd grown up dirt poor in eastern Kentucky and who never, ever, ever signed anything without reading it twice, out loud, while I made dinner. He had also been a man who did not trust Theodore from the moment he met him at that first Thanksgiving. He never said anything mean. He just got quieter when Theodore was around. And after Theodore and my daughter had been married about 4 years, he sat me down one night in this very kitchen and said, Honey, I want to talk to you about the house, about what happens to it, about what could happen to it if something happens to me first. That conversation lasted 3 nights. By the end of it, my husband had drafted a plan with our family attorney, a woman named Loretta who had been my husband's student in 1981 and who still called him Mr. Peria, P, with a capital P every time we ran into her at the grocery store. The plan was simple. The house, upon my husband's death, would not pass to me outright. It would pass into an irrevocable trust, with me as the sole lifetime beneficiary and trustee. The remainder beneficiaries, the people who would inherit after I was gone, were my grandchildren, named individually. Not my daughter, not my son-in-law, my grandchildren. And the trust documents had a very specific clause my husband had insisted on. The trust property could not be sold, encumbered, or otherwise transferred during my lifetime without my written consent, witnessed and notarized. The paper Theodore had me sign at the hospital after my husband died, the one he claimed gave my daughter co-ownership. I'd never signed it. I'd signed a healthcare directive. I'd signed funeral arrangements. I'd signed the form authorizing the hospital to release my husband's body. I had not signed anything related to the house because there was nothing to sign. The house was already in trust. It had been in trust since 2010, 2 years before my husband got sick. I knew this. Theodore did not know this. My daughter did not know this. My husband and I had decided not to tell her because my husband had said, if something happens and Theodore gets ideas, I don't want her to be in the position of having to lie to him. I want her to be in the position of not knowing. I sat at my husband's desk and I looked at the trust documents and I thought about my husband for a long time. I thought about how he used to come up behind me in the kitchen and put his chin on the top of my head. I thought about how the last thing he said to me, the very last coherent thing, was, "Don't let him near the deed, honey." I thought he was hallucinating from the morphine. I'd patted his hand and said, "Of course not, sweetheart." I hadn't known he was warning me. I picked up the phone and I called Loretta. "Loretta," I said when she answered. "It's me. I need you to pull the trust documents, and then I need you to tell me whether what I'm about to describe to you is fraud." She listened. She did not interrupt. When I was done, She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "Honey, you sit tight. I'm canceling my Wednesday appointments. I'll be at your house at 9 in the morning. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and don't say a word to your daughter until I get there." I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, and I went to bed at 9. I slept like a baby. I don't know what that says about me, but it's the truth. Loretta arrived at 8:45 with 2 cups of coffee, a yellow legal pad, and an expression I had only ever seen on her face once before, which was the day my husband's diagnosis came back. She set everything down on my kitchen table, and she said, "First, the legal situation, which is excellent for you and very bad for them. Second, the criminal situation, which is even worse for them. Now sit down. We have work to do." She walked me through it. The trust was airtight. Any sale Theodore had brokered was, at best, fraudulent and unenforceable. At worst, and this was where her voice got very quiet, Theodore had likely forged my signature on a document somewhere along the way, because no real estate transaction could move forward without something purporting to come from the legal owner, which was me, which meant that somewhere out there was a piece of paper with my name on it that I had never signed. "Honey," she said, "I need you to think very carefully. Have you signed any documents in the last 6 months? Anything at all? Including things your daughter brought to you?" I thought about it. I thought hard. "There was a birthday card," I said. "A birthday card. My daughter brought over a card for my granddaughter's birthday. She said she'd forgotten to sign it, and could I sign it as well from Grandma? I signed it, and then she said, 'Oh wait, this one's smudged. Let me get another one.' And she handed me a second card, and I signed that one too. And then a third. She said she wanted me to sign 3 because she wasn't sure which one looked nicest." Loretta closed her eyes for a long moment. "Honey," she said, "I am so sorry. But I'm pretty sure those were not birthday cards. I'm pretty sure those were signature exemplars. And somewhere there is a document that has your signature lifted off one of them and placed onto a deed of transfer." I felt the floor drop a little, not because of the fraud, because of my daughter. My own daughter had sat at this kitchen table with a fake birthday card and watched me sign my name 3 times so her husband could steal my house. I did not cry. I have cried a lot in my 67 years. And I know when crying helps and when it doesn't, and right then it would not have helped. "What do?" I said. "You do nothing," Loretta said. "You let them come back Thursday. You let Theodore do all the talking. You ask careful, harmless questions. And you let me record the conversation, which is legal in North Carolina because we are one-party consent state and you are the one-party consent state. And then we are going to take everything to the district attorney's office, and we are going to let the legal system do what the legal system does to a man who forges an elderly woman's signature to steal her house. And my daughter?" Loretta paused. "Honey, that's a question I can't answer for you. The law is going to do what the law does. Whether you press to include her or ask the DA to consider her circumstances, that's your call. But I want you to know something. Right now, the way this is structured, she could be looking at conspiracy to commit deed fraud. That's a felony. She would lose her job. She might lose her kids. Theodore is the architect of this, but she is sitting in the passenger seat with both hands on the map." I thought about my daughter folding her hands in her lap, the way she had not looked at me, the way Theodore had put his hand on the back of her neck. "Let's see what she does on Thursday," I said. Thursday came. I baked another lemon cake because I had run out of the first one, and because I wanted everything to look normal. They arrived at 4. Theodore was wearing a different suit. My daughter had her hair pulled back, which she does when she is nervous. She had a stack of papers and a manila folder. "Mom," she said, "have you had time to think?" "I have, and..." I poured them coffee. I cut them cake. I sat down across from them at the table where my husband had eaten his last meal in this house before we drove to the hospital and never came back. "Theodore," I said, "walk me through the paperwork." His salesman's smile came back full strength. He'd been preparing for this all week. "Of course," he said. He opened the folder. "These are the closing documents. The buyer is a corporation called Sterling Holdings, a very reputable group out of Raleigh. The sale price is $472,000. After commissions and closing costs, we net $423,400. Of that, $65,000 goes immediately to Sunny Meadows as a refundable deposit in the first year's care. The remainder will be placed into a managed account in your daughter's name as your designated financial representative, from which Sunny Meadows will be paid monthly. And the deed transfer? I said. How did that work exactly? Procedurally. Well, as I explained Tuesday, you had previously placed the property into joint ownership with your daughter, so she had the authority to initiate the listing. You signed the closing documents about 6 weeks ago. Do you not remember? You signed at our house the day we had everyone over for your granddaughter's birthday. The birthday cards, I said. What? Never mind, go on. He went on. He talked for 10 minutes. He explained the timeline. He named the title company. He named the title company. He named the notary. He even named the buyer's agent. He gave me, on a silver platter, every single piece of information that Loretta needed. When he was done, I looked at my daughter. Sweetheart, I said, did you know about any of this? She blinked. She looked at Theodore. She looked at her hands. Mom, did you know your husband had me sign 3 birthday cards because he needed copies of my signature? The blood left her face. I watched it leave. I will remember the way it left her face for as long as I live. What? She said. It's a simple question, sweetheart. Did you know? I don't know what you're talking about. The cards you brought to me for your daughter's birthday, you said one was smudged, then another. I signed 3. Did you know what your husband was going to do with those signatures? Theodore stood up. This conversation is over, he said. We came here to help you transition into your new life. If you're going to be paranoid and accusatory, sit down, Theodore. Something in my voice did something to him. He sat down. My attorney will be here in about 15 minutes, I said. Her name is Loretta. You may remember her from my husband's funeral. She is going to walk you through some documents. She is going to explain to you what an irrevocable trust is. She is going to explain to you what happens to a person who forges a signature on a deed transfer in the state of North Carolina. And then she is going to give the 2 of you a choice, which is more than you gave me. My daughter started to cry. Real crying this time. The kind that comes up from a deep place and shakes the whole body. Theodore did not put his hand on the back of her neck. He did, however, try to leave. I blocked the door from the inside, and Loretta pulled into the driveway right then anyway. She came in carrying her briefcase like a woman going to war. She sat down at my kitchen table. She opened the briefcase. She looked at Theodore for a long, level moment. Mr. Theodore, she said, I think you should know that I have already had a very productive conversation with the district attorney's office in Mecklenburg County. I have also had a very productive conversation with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission regarding your professional license. And I have had a very, very productive conversation with the title company that you used, who I have known socially for 26 years. The title insurance on the sale has been frozen. The buyer has been notified. Sterling Holdings is going to be made whole, and they are not going to be pursuing the property. The sale, in other words, is being unwound as we speak. He stared at her. He didn't say anything. Now here is the situation as it stands. You forged the signature of an elderly woman on a deed transfer. That is deed fraud, which in this state is a Class H felony. You also exercised undue influence on your wife to participate in that fraud, although, based on what I'm hearing, she may not have fully understood what she was participating in. The district attorney is willing to consider the difference. He is willing to consider it. He has not yet agreed to anything. What he is also willing to consider is restitution, full restitution, plus a guilty plea, plus the surrender of your real estate license, plus a no-contact order with this woman for a period of 7 years. In exchange, he will not seek prison time. He will seek probation and a permanent felony record. That is the offer. You have 24 hours. She closed the briefcase. She stood up. Now, before I leave, I have a few things to say to your wife. Privately. Theodore, you can wait on the porch. He went to the porch like a dog. I have never seen anything like it. The man who had sat in my kitchen 3 days earlier and told me I had to be out by Sunday, walking out onto my porch because a woman in a navy suit told him to. When he was gone, Loretta turned to my daughter, who was still crying. "Sweetheart," Loretta said, and her voice was softer now. "I knew you when you were 8 years old. I watched you play soccer in your father's backyard. I want you to listen to me very carefully. I do not believe you're an evil person. I believe you are married to one, and I believe you have spent 11 years slowly being convinced that things that are wrong are normal. But here is what I know for sure. The birthday cards were not your idea. He told you to bring them. Yes or no?" "Yes," my daughter whispered. "And you didn't know what they were really for." I thought maybe. I thought maybe something, but I didn't ask." "You didn't ask because you didn't want to know." "Yes, and the assisted living facility, that was his idea." "Yes, and the assisted living facility, that was his idea." "Yes, and the timeline, the Sunday deadline." "Yes." "Sweetheart, your mother is sitting right here. I'm going to step outside for a few minutes. The two of you are going to talk, and then your mother is going to decide some things. Do you understand?" My daughter nodded. Loretta stepped onto the porch with Theodore. I heard her say something to him, quietly. I don't know what it was. He did not say anything back. My daughter and I sat at the kitchen table. The lemon cake was still on the plate between us, untouched. I don't remember everything we said that afternoon. I remember she said she was sorry. I remember she said she had been afraid of him for years. I remember she said she had not known about the trust, had not known about the forgery, had not known what the birthday cards were for, but had suspected for a long time that her husband was someone she did not want to be married to. She talked about money disappearing. She talked about the credit cards in her name that she did not remember opening. She talked about how he had isolated her from her friends, from her cousins, from me. I listened. I did not interrupt. I am 67 years old, and I have learned that when someone is finally telling you the truth, you let them tell it. When she was done, I asked her one question. "What do you want, sweetheart?" She cried for a long time before she answered. And then she said, "I want my mother back." The DA accepted the plea. Theodore is a convicted felon now. He lost his real estate license. He paid back every dime, plus interest, plus the legal fees, plus what amounted to a significant penalty that went into a fund I set up for my grandchildren's college tuition. He is not allowed within 500 feet of me until 2031. My daughter filed for divorce 6 weeks after that Thursday, and it was finalized last spring. She and the kids moved into an apartment about 10 minutes from my house. She is back at work, full-time, in the dental office where she worked before she met him. She is in therapy. She comes to dinner on Sundays. It has not been easy. There's a thing that happens between a mother and daughter when one of them has helped, even passively, even through cowardice, the other to be harmed. It does not go away because one of you apologizes and the other one nods. It takes a long time. We are not all the way through it. I do not know if we ever will be. But she is here, and she is sober and honest and trying, and her children are not growing up in a house with a man who teaches them that lying is normal. So we are doing the work. I am still in my house. I sleep in the bedroom I shared with my husband for 38 years. I drink my coffee in the kitchen he refinished. I read to the second graders at St. Catherine's on Tuesdays. I climb Stone Mountain with my granddaughter every fall, and I beat her there last October. I am going to keep beating her there until my knees finally tell me to stop. People ask me, sometimes, how I knew not to cry that Tuesday afternoon. How I knew to pour them coffee and cut them cake and say, very calmly, "Is that so?" I tell them the truth, which is that my husband told me a long time ago, when somebody shows you who they are, the first thing to do is not to argue. The first thing to do is to listen, to remember, and to put it in your pocket. You can take it out later, when you have your lawyer in the room and your facts in order. You don't have to win the fight that's in front of you. You only have to win the war. And to anyone listening to me right now, anyone with a son or a daughter or a son-in-law or a daughter-in-law who has started slowly, slowly, slowly to talk about your house and your money and your safety in voices that sound a little too rehearsed, please, please, do me one favor. Do not sign anything you have not read. Do not sign anything anyone hands you in a hospital. Do not sign 3 birthday cards in a row because one is smudged. And get yourself a lawyer, a real one who knew you when, one who will pick up the phone on a Wednesday morning and cancel her appointments because an old friend needs her. I was lucky. I had my husband who saw it coming. I had Loretta who knew where every paper was filed. I had my own stubbornness, which has gotten me into trouble plenty of times in this life, but which finally paid off. Not everyone is going to be that lucky. Be that lucky anyway. Be smarter than I almost was. Listen to your gut when it whispers. And remember, when somebody you love sits across from you at your own kitchen table and tells you that you have one day to pack, you have more than one day. You have every day for the rest of your life. They just don't know it yet. I'm 68 years old now, and I've had a year to sit with what happened at my kitchen table that Tuesday afternoon. A year to turn it over in my hands like a stone from the riverbed. And the thing I keep coming back to is this. Nothing that happened was an accident. Not the good and not the bad. Every piece of it was planted by somebody years before the harvest came in. Theodore did not wake up one morning and decide to steal a house. He had been practicing for years. Small lies, then bigger ones. A credit card here, a fake signature there. He told himself each time that it was fine, that he deserved it, that nobody would notice. And by the time he sat across from me with that brochure, he had practiced lying so long that he believed his own face in the mirror. That is what happens when a person feeds a small wrong every day. It grows teeth. But my husband had also been planting things for years. Quietly. He never told me he was afraid of Theodore. He just sat down with Loretta one night and built a fence around our life, post by post, while I was making chicken and dumplings in the kitchen. He didn't lecture. He didn't accuse anyone. He just did the work. And when the day came that we needed that fence, it was already there. 6 feet tall, locked. That, to me, is what wisdom actually looks like. Not the loud kind, not the kind that gives speeches. The kind that signs paperwork on a Tuesday afternoon and files it away and doesn't mention it for 7 years. The kind that watches a man at Thanksgiving and pays attention to what he is instead of what he says. I think about my daughter, too. About how a smart woman ends up bringing her own mother 3 birthday cards to sign. It's because she stopped paying attention to her own gut a long time ago. Little by little, year by year, each small surrender felt survivable, until one day she was sitting at her own mother's kitchen table helping a man take everything. She didn't get there overnight. Nobody does. What I want anyone listening to understand is that you build the version of yourself you're going to be at 68, starting at 28, at 38, at 48. Every honest conversation you have, every time you read the fine print, every time you say no to something that feels wrong even when you can't explain why, you are putting another post in your fence. And every time you let it slide, you are taking one out. I am not in my house today because I am clever. I am in my house today because my husband was honest with himself about what he saw, and because I was stubborn enough to ask one more question when most people would have stopped asking. Those are not gifts. Those are habits. Built one ordinary day at a time. You can build them too. Starting today. Starting at this kitchen table, wherever yours is.